Anyway.
So this story that you want to tell about good and evil, like, do you have a script, or is it just a thing in your head? What is it?
Yeah, it's the resurrection story, but it's not linear, because you can't really. It's hard to understand, so it's got to be put in a framework where you answer a few other questions as well. And you have to juxtapose the event itself against everything else so that it makes some kind of sense in a bigger picture, which is a hard thing to do. And it took my brother and I and a guy called Randall Wallace, plus my brother and I, took us 6-7 years to write it.
So are you doing this with historians as well? Are you trying to make it?
Yeah, historical stuff. Well, I regard the Gospels as history. It's verifiable history. Some people say, oh, it's a fairy tale. He never existed, but he did. And there are other accounts, verifiable historical accounts outside the biblical ones that also bear this up, that yes, he did exist. And the other aspect of that is that all the evangelists, the apostles who went out there, every single one of those guys died rather than deny their belief. And nobody dies for a lie. Nobody.
Right.
So that's part of what I'm doing. It's like showing nobody dies for a lie.
Yeah. Well, the resurrection is the one that is the most difficult for people to swallow.
Yes.
That is the one that requires the most faith.
The most faith and the most belief. Yeah, resurrection.
Yeah.
Who gets back up 3 days later after he gets murdered in public? Who gets back up under his own power? Buddha didn't do that shit.
Right.
So.
You believe that was a real event?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What brought you to that belief? Is this something that you've always had, or is it something you studied it and you've come to this conclusion because of the historical accounts? And
yes, I think as a child, one accepts things on faith because you're raised by people who are nice to you and they believe it. And my dad was a pretty smart guy. He was like Mensa smart, like real smart. Like back in 1968, he won Jeopardy, right? And then
really,
and then they brought all the Jeopardy winners back, and he played all the winners, and he beat all of them too. So he had a mind like a steel trap, and his memory was practically photographic. My memory is pornographic, but it's like his was like, I don't have that kind of mind,
right?
But I'm more like, he did math, and I can't add, but. So as a child, you learn these things and you accept them on faith. And I still have that faith, but as I got older, I came to it through intellect and through reading and putting things together in accounts, and then occurrences like in my own life. I mean, just recently they verified the Shroud of Turin. Have you seen that?
I've been reading about it, and I know that there's some contention, there's some discussion and debate about it, but they used to think that it was only a couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
And now they've changed that.
Yeah, they said no, it's back then.
They also don't understand how it was made, which to me is very fascinating, because it's not paint. It's not, they don't know what caused the image itself and how that technology would have even been available.
It wasn't, no.
A couple thousand years ago.
An intense light, I mean, atomic, to leave almost like a photographic imprint on a piece of cloth.
Yeah.
And
it's wild. Pull that up. Pull the Shroud of Turin up.
Oh, yeah.
It's wild to look at because it's so interesting.
Oh, yeah. And you can see it, that it depicts a first century Hebrew male, because the hairstyle was from the first century, and a Hebrew hairstyle, that he was about 6 feet tall, that he was completely scourged all over his body. He was crucified. That's it there.
The one on the left is the one on the right is just like an artistic rendition.
Yeah, that's the face.
Yeah, click on that one. The face. Yeah, that's good enough. Get that large. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Scourged, beaten.
Yeah.
The wounds on the thorns, the hands, the feet, and the scourging, and the hairstyle was from the first century, and the pollens that they found in the cloth were from that region.
Yeah.
Also, the weave was a first century weave that was typical. And another guy, an archaeologist who I knew who actually translated the Passion into Aramaic, told me that if you look close, you can see the image of a Tiberius coin marks on the eyes. Now, I don't know if that's real or not. I've never actually checked that, but that there's images of Tiberius on the coin.
So they would put the coins over the eyes?
Yeah. So that would date it. But they have now verified that it does actually go back to that time period. For a while, they were testing pieces that had been repaired in the 13th century or, you know. So.
What is the latest on that, Jamie? Can you see, like...
I was trying to get that. I've 2 different articles from within the last 6 months saying
the
opposite
Smithsonian
things. So
opposite, of course.
Dig into which one sounded the most accurate.
Well, it's such a crazy thing to even try to verify. Like, what are you saying? You're saying that this is really the shroud that Jesus was covered in? So you're saying Jesus historically absolutely did exist, and we think that this is the shroud that covered him. That alone, people, incredulity, people's immediately their hackles raise, like, wait a minute, and they just instead of like looking at it objectively, they almost always want to look at it from a point of view of disproving it immediately, dismissing it immediately.
But that's that's science, isn't it? You have to sort of you play the devil's advocate, and that's okay. Go for it, you know.
Are you aware of Graham Hancock?
Oh no.
Graham Hancock is he's sort of a historian that has a very he's got a series on Netflix. He's a fascinating guy, and his career started because he was investigating these accounts in Ethiopia of the Ark of the Covenant, and that they believe the Ark of the Covenant is in this one church that's protected by all these monks that wind up getting cataracts and radiation disease and sickness, and they think that it's because they're protecting this Ark of the Covenant, this actual thing, that it's an actual physical thing that's there.
And if you touch it, you get zapped.
Yeah, and that even being in its presence fucks these people up.
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, it's got to be someplace, right? They buried it. They lost track of it.
Yeah.
But, man, it used to be. And all the stories are, if you even touched it, you fall over, you know, because it was constructed electrically somehow.
Yeah, like, what is that? What's in there? Why is it giving people cancer if they're really protecting it?
I think it's the actual structure of the container it's in that is the problem. That's my thought on it. I could be wrong. But I think inside it they have things from like when Moses was like manna and, you know, stuff like that they managed to keep from, like, for example, they say that that Golgotha, the place where the crucifixion happened, it's called Golgotha, the place of the skull, because that's where Adam's head is buried.
Really?
Yes, and that it's also perhaps the same place. And it tells you it's kind of in the same area where Abraham almost sacrifices Isaac. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And it's and the cross, when in any artistic depiction, at the foot of the cross, underneath it is the skull, representing the skull of Adam.
Huh.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
That's the skull of Adam, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
Place of the skull, memory, myth, and the chapel of Adam.
What did you find on the Shroud of Turin, Jamie?
Both those articles just asked like one person. Like one researcher thought it was, another researcher based off of their research said it wasn't.
Can you put it to the one that thought it was?
So the one who thought it was is like a
Does
nuclear
date to the time of
researcher.
Jesus. A nuclear researcher, Jesus
The
Christ.
other one was like a AI artist from Brazil.
Yeah.
So I don't know who has the most.
So it says, study published in the
Skin
journal Heritage. The authors conducted dating work on a sample from the shroud, coming to the conclusion that it may be a 2,000-year-old relic. The shroud, which has long been the subject of intense scrutiny, features a faint image of a man some believe is the body of Jesus miraculously imprinted onto the cloth. While the latest study does not discuss the question of whether or not the artifact was indeed Jesus' burial shroud, specifically, the authors did find its age is roughly consistent with his time. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, isn't the Smithsonian guy all for it? I don't know. Maybe that's him. I don't know. But, yeah. There's for and against. There's always been.
Yeah, always. But it's just...
But the image is like...
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Whatever it is pretty crazy. And the fact that they don't know how they made it is also pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's not a painting.
Nope.
And then not exactly sure how
No.
it even came about.
Yeah. It had to have been some kind of intense light.
Well, the thought was that even trying to replicate something like that today would be incredibly difficult to do.
Sure. It's like an X-ray vision.
Yeah.
It's like an X-ray. That's what you really see it in the negative only.
Right.
It's
Right.
crazy.
It's like a negative. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I buy it, but that's not the only reason I buy it. I mean, I think there's other logical reasons why I believe. So.
Like, what are those?
Oh, okay. Stuff that happens in your own life. The results you get from actually appealing to a power greater than yourself, And, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. I am flawed in the fact that I am, by nature, born an alcoholic, right? I did drugs, I did alcohol, so... and there was nothing that could stop me from doing that. Nothing. So I was really kind of you're on a downhill run. So I regard the fact that I was able to appeal to something greater than myself to help me and actually stop me doing that. I think that's a miracle. It is. For me, it is. And for many. So...
Well, that is the thing about AA, right? It's a part of the whole process is appealing to a higher power.
Sure. It's a spiritual program.
Yeah.
Because you're suffering a spiritual malady,
Yeah.
So it's a spiritual cure. And that's the essence, I think, of why it works. Because you can't explain it otherwise. I mean, you kind of can, but I think what you're being asked to do is to think about other people and other things more than yourself, because it's kind of an ego disease.
Yeah.
So if you...
That is the problem with addiction, right? It's very narcissistic.
Very narcissistic.
Because you're constantly thinking about yourself and what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I need a drink. I need a bump. I need I need something.
Sure, I need...
Yeah.
And no matter what you need, it's never going to be enough.
Right.
So you actually have to appeal to something outside that you consider bigger and better than yourself, which instantly kind of pushes you more in the direction of humility.
Yes.
because you're not the center of the universe anymore.
Right.
And that you can't do it. And the first step in any of that sort of stuff is accepting that you are powerless over it. That's the most powerful step you can do, is that you're powerless. When you realize that, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
there's fuck all I can do about this. I have to appeal to something better than me. And that, to me, is a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.